Hey you guys, this is Mr. Millings, and in this video we are going to do some more mole composition problems. Specifically, we're going to take a look at some mass calculations of molecules. So let's jump right in and take a look at an example. In this example it says, what mass of oxygen is in 3.25 times 10 to the second grams of calcium hydroxide. So we have some calcium hydroxide, and what we're trying to figure out is the mass of oxygen in this mass of calcium hydroxide. So the very first thing that we have to figure out is the chemical formula for calcium hydroxide. So we know the chemical symbol of calcium is Ca, and calcium comes from group 2 on the periodic table of elements, therefore it has a positive 2 charge. Its ion has a plus 2 charge. Hydroxide, if we take a look at a polyatomic ion list, like the one that just popped up in front of you, you can see the chemical formula for hydroxide is OH with a negative 1 charge. So these two ionic charges don't add up to 0. Keep in mind that whenever we have a positive ion bonded to a negative ion, the ionic charges have to add up to 0, and the way that we get them to add up to 0 is to add subscripts. So we're going to throw parentheses around our hydroxide, and then we're going to put a 2. So the chemical formula for calcium hydroxide is going to end up being CaOH2. So now that we have that figured out, this question says what mass of oxygen is in 3.25 times 10 to the second grams of calcium hydroxide. So we're starting off, or the known quantity is 3.25 times 10 to the second grams of calcium hydroxide, CaOH2. And we want to know the mass of just oxygen in this mass of calcium hydroxide. So we have to think about this. We know the mass in grams of calcium hydroxide. We want to figure out the mass in grams of just oxygen. So what we have to do is we have to cancel out grams of calcium hydroxide and convert to a different unit of measurement, so that way we can figure out the mass of oxygen here. So we're going to cancel out grams of calcium hydroxide. That's going to have to go on the bottom of our next little fraction or equivalent statement right here. Whoops, let me go ahead and erase that. So that's going to have to go on the bottom of our next equivalent statement. So we have grams of calcium hydroxide that are going to go on the bottom. And we should probably go ahead and convert the grams of calcium hydroxide to moles of calcium hydroxide. Once we're done doing that, we're now going to have to figure out the number of moles of oxygen, since we're asked to figure out the mass in grams of oxygen. So we're going to have to cancel out moles of calcium hydroxide, so we'll go ahead and put that at the bottom. Moles of calcium hydroxide. We'll put that at the bottom of our next equivalent statement, and we're going to have to convert to moles of oxygen. Lastly, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to cancel out moles of oxygen, so we'll put that at the bottom of our last little fraction or equivalent statement, and we're going to have to convert to grams of oxygen. So now we have to fill in the missing pieces. Let's think about this. We know that 1 mole of oxygen, if we take a look on the periodic table that just popped up, is 16.00 grams. If we take a look at this compound right here, or molecule right here, if we take a look here, 1 mole of calcium hydroxide contains 2 moles of oxygen. We take 2 times the subscript 1 here, and we end up with 2 moles of oxygen. And so now, what about this part right here? Well, we know 1 mole of calcium hydroxide is how many grams? Well, we need to figure out the molar mass of calcium hydroxide in order to answer this part. So let's figure out the molar mass of calcium hydroxide, CaOH2. If we take a look, calcium hydroxide is made up of calcium, oxygen, and hydrogen. We can see that there's one calcium, there are two oxygens, and there are two hydrogens. So what we need to do here is we need to take 1 times the molar mass of calcium, which if you look on the periodic table of elements that just popped up in front of you, you can see the molar mass is 40.08. And now we're going to go ahead and leave the units off while we're doing the math on this calculation. We'll attach the unit to the final answer. We can see here that there's 2 oxygens, and the molar mass of 1 oxygen, if we take a look at that periodic table that just popped up, is 16.00 grams per mole. And last but not least, we have 2 hydrogens. We're going to multiply that by the molar mass of hydrogen, which if you take a look at the periodic table that just popped up is 1.01, and we're going to get 2.02. So what do we do now? Well, we have to add all 3 of these values together, and when we add all 3 of these values together, we're going to get a molar mass of, let me grab my calculator here, we're going to get a molar mass of 74.1, or 74.10 grams per mole. So here's our molar mass. We know that for every 1 mole of calcium hydroxide, it's going to have a mass of 74.10 grams. So now we can go ahead and plug this right into here, 74.10 grams. So now if we take a look what happens, we can see that we have grams of calcium hydroxide in the numerator and in the denominator. They can cancel. We have moles of calcium hydroxide in the numerator and denominator. They can cancel. We have moles of oxygen in the numerator and denominator. They can cancel, leaving us with grams of oxygen left over. So now we just start from the left here with this number here. We work our way from left to right. And if we come across the number other than 1 in the denominator, we're going to divide. And if we come across the number other than 1 in the numerator, we're going to multiply. So we're going to take 3.25 times 10 to the second. We're going to divide that by 74.10. We're going to multiply by 2 and then multiply by 16.00, and our final answer is going to be 140. Final answer of 140 grams of oxygen. And so we have 3 significant figures here in our given quantity. Therefore, our final answer needs to contain 3 significant figures. So what mass of oxygen is in 3.25 times 10 to the second grams of calcium hydroxide? Well, we just figured that out. It's 140 grams of oxygen. So if you like what you see, go ahead and click that little bomb in the bottom right-hand corner. That will subscribe you to my channel. And feel free to leave any comments or questions in the comments section down below. And I really hope you guys found this helpful.